You've tried being easygoing and flexible, and you've tried being clear and firm, but nothing has worked when it comes to co-parenting with your ex, and I can tell you why. You are trying to do the impossible. If your ex is narcissistic, abusive, controlling, rageful, or in some other way toxic, your efforts at any reasonable co-parenting are going to be thwarted. But you don't need to give up because there is something you can do, and it's called parallel parenting. Today, I'm going to teach you all about the differences between co-parenting and parallel parenting and my top 5 tips for creating as much peace for yourself as possible. So stay tuned. Hello. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Abby Medcalf. You should know me by now. I am very happy to be here, and I want to give a special shout out to Brian. He's listening, I know, who sent in this question a while ago. We sort of went back and forth, and I was going to do a YouTube live, which I just started doing around the question, and then I realized, you know what, this is just a whole episode. So I put it in front of some other things to get it here into the end of season 5. I cannot believe it. 249 episodes this is of the podcast. I'm ending season 5. We'll be beginning season 6, and I've already started recording for that, but there's going to be 2 weeks off from the podcast, which I always do, again, twice a year. So just so you know, there'll only be 2 episodes in August that come out because your girl needs a break a couple times a year. I'm coming at you with all the good stuff and I need a break. I also want to say that someone else had written in saying that, she said, are there any notes for the podcast? There's just so much you say, there's so much going on. Sometimes you go off on a tangent, it's hard for me to always stay with it or really stay focused. And I want to remind everyone that on my website, abbymedcalf.com, there is a corresponding blog post that I do for all of the podcast episodes. So if you'd like notes later, or if you just want to go back for a little refresher, but you don't want to, listen to the whole episode again, guess what? You can go just search for the title on my website or the keyword, and it'll come up and you can look. It's under relationship tips and tools. That's where my blog is on my website. But again, if you do a search on the site, it'll just come up. Why do I do this extra work? Because I love you. Because I know that a lot of people are listening, but then kind of need some notes later or sort of need someone else. I also know some people don't listen to the podcast and would rather read. So I've got them both. This is also helpful if you have someone in your life who, that person that you're sort of give things to and you go, hey, why don't you listen to this? Or why don't you read that? And they don't read the book or they don't listen to the podcast. But if you would send them maybe a link or read it with them, just a link of something that takes 10 minutes to read, that's often a way you can sort of share information with someone who might not otherwise be listening. So I just want to say that. And yeah, I'm doing YouTube lives now. I'm trying it for the next month, so we'll see if I love them and if I'll continue. But and you don't have to watch them live, although you can. Right now they're on Wednesdays here in the United States at 1 o'clock Pacific time, because I'm here on the West Coast of the United States. And you can listen live. I hope you do. Come on by. I'm answering. It's called Ask Dr. Abby. So if you have a specific question, specific kind of question, I'll answer it there. And you can send those in to me at abbymedcalf.com or the Let's Connect page on my website or any of that stuff, or DM me on Instagram or something. And it's also, if you go to my YouTube page, there's a little tab that says live, and you can go to all the recordings there also if you want to listen to something later and you don't have time that day, or you just can't get enough Abby. You just can't get enough of me and you want more. So there you go. It's great to be here with you. Let's get going. So there's no place better to start than what is a toxic ex, right? I want to be very clear about what I'm talking about. And a toxic ex can be a lot of things. They can be obviously narcissistic, controlling, abusive, passive-aggressive, jealous, possessive, or I guess are just plain mean. You know, having a toxic ex means this person doesn't respect you or your boundaries. It means they're probably doing everything they can to maintain some form of control in your life. And they have the perfect vehicle, which is the children you have together. I know that some people have written in asking about how to deal with a toxic ex, period. And I might do an episode on that, but I need to tell you, in a lot of ways, I don't know why you're talking to this person at all. If you don't have children with them, you have no reason for them to be in your life anymore. And I get that maybe they're a friend of the family, or, your mother still wants them in your life and she's still talking to this person or whatever. So I get that there are instances where that might be true. I'm just not sure if I'm going to tackle that or not, because it's really, if the person is like that, that's serious abuse. And I don't, I try to kind of stay in my lane here, like, to me, that's almost something you'd go to domestic violence for. It's really something else, but I don't know, write in if you really want this answered and give me something specific I could, put my teeth into about it, just dealing with a toxic ex when you don't have kids. And I will think about doing an episode on that. All right. So basically though, when you're parenting with a toxic ex, it means that they want your attention. That's what they want. They want your attention, and they want to be in charge of how you feel. Maybe they just feel very hurt by you. Maybe you're the one who wanted to separate, and they're so angry about it. Although I'll tell you, I get this situation a lot, even when they're the person who wanted to separate. They're the ones who are like, I'm out of here. The problem with that generally is that people will often leave a relationship because they're unhappy, and they think that their partner is why they're unhappy, but then they leave and they're still miserable. So they somehow still decide that their ex is they've just got this connected in their brain that their ex is the reason they're unhappy. So they create drama and bad things, even though, hey, you left me. Like, you said I was the reason you're unhappy. You're gone now. I don't know why you still think I make you unhappy, but they will still create that in their heads. Really what's happening here is they want you as miserable as they are. They want to know that they're still dominant in your life, just, despite, again, the fact that you've broken up. And by the way, all these are likely reasons that you broke up in the first place, but, regardless. And so I want to say this, I'm not going to go deep into narcissism or narcissistic tendencies here, because I have covered that. I did a previous episode devoted to dealing with narcissism, and what narcissism is and all that. I've done a previous episode about gaslighting, all about gaslighting. Again, you can search that on any platform that you listen to me on. If you search Abby Medcalf gaslighting, it's going to come right up. Abby Medcalf, narcissism, whatever, narcissist. It's going to come right up. Or again, go to the website if you're having trouble. I do know that a lot of the platforms, for some reason, I have so many episodes. They don't hold all the episodes. They don't hold some of the past ones. And as I keep growing, but my website does. So you can always go there for everything you need. I know that's not always the way you want to listen to something, but you can download it from there and listen. So for now, I'll trust that you just know your ex is toxic because you've been struggling with their behavior. You've been struggling with consistency and co-parenting, and you get it. And I'll tell you the big way you know that your ex is toxic is because after you interact with them, you're consistently feeling drained, miserable, resentful, or hopeless, or all the above. So that lets you know also. And let me say this, having a toxic ex, this is really the point of today. It means you can't co-parent, because the co in co-parenting, you know what co means? Together, mutual. That's the definition of that. And that is not something your ex cares about. Their main motivation it's not about what's doing best for your children. That is not their main motivation. Their main motivation is in maintaining control over you and the situation. That's their main motivation. I'm not saying it's conscious. Your ex is doing a lot of things unconsciously, but their main some not so unconsciously, but their main objective is making you suffer, even if that means making your children suffer or even harming your kids. Like when an ex is talking shit about you to the kids, that's harming those children. I mean, every bit of evidence says so. Research says so. It's horrible. It's so mean to do, but that is how hijacked their brain is. That is how gone they are. So just so you know, I mean, so you're trying to be rational with this irrational person, and that is your problem. You can't co-parent with a toxic ex. Instead, as I said in the introduction, you have to parallel parent. So what is parallel parenting? Well, parallel parenting is just what it sounds like. Parenting in two different spaces, parallel, right? They don't overlap. The focus here really is on having limited interaction with your ex and clear, I would say almost rigid boundaries. And I hate having rigid boundaries. I think boundaries are meant to be flexible. And yes, there's going to be some flexibility here, but mostly you're going to be leaning towards more rigid, very clear, very what I call thick boundaries. Okay. This means lots of rules about how and when you'll communicate and having a structured parenting plan that I believe needs to be court ordered. Okay. Just has to be, because otherwise, I don't know. Again, I've been counseling people for 40 years in different countries, in different states here in the United States, in every sort of different scenario you can imagine, from nonprofits to for-profits to hospitals to schools to, community agencies to, I mean, it goes on and on. I really do. I think it's one of my big strengths is I have a huge wealth of experience in different kinds of situations. So I have had to deal with this particular issue really for about maybe, let's say 30 of those years. Okay. I mean, really, it's been a consistent thing that comes up in my private practice and all the years I've done things before. So I get it. I understand this topic well. And you might listen today and think, well, that doesn't exactly match me. And well, this is a little different. I'm telling you right now, uniqueness is fatal. And you have to find a way to listen to what I'm saying, and you have to find a way to make this work. I'm not saying that I'm the be all end all. I'm not saying this is the only thing that works, but you wouldn't be here if what you were doing was working. So I'm really, unless you're doing everything all the tips I'm about to say, I mean religiously, then, I would say it's really time to up the ante with someone, I guess, more specialized than me. Okay. So I'll tell you that right now, but I do feel, like I can talk about this topic. I will also share, many of you know, I'm divorced from my children's dad, but we co-parent because we have a super, super amicable relationship. So we co-parent very easily. I mean, there's some bumps, right? In anything, even if you're just parenting when you're married, there's bumps, but, we really do have thank you, God, we've both worked hard at it, but we have a really great co-parenting. And I do with Gary's ex-wife, when we co-parent those, they're adults, but, they're still my babies. So there's co-parenting everywhere. there's many parents in our picture, and we've all really found a way to, live together. And I'm not, that's what that is. And you can't do that. I don't know what else to say. Like, so you'll hear these kind of stories and people like, oh, you just have to do this. You just have to do that. No, I would never tell you that. I can't tell you that because you have a completely different situation. I don't have, there's no narcissists in this picture, of the 8 of us, all of us, all these parents. There's people who really do have the kids' best interests at heart and have open hearts around that. Do you know what I mean? So that is a different thing, and that's what I'm trying to separate for you. So please stop listening to the advice of other people. And there's people who have difficult exes. I will say when I first got divorced, it was more difficult for sure, and I had to work differently at that than I do now. But that's still different. He still had our kids' best interests at heart. So, again, someone will try to compare their relationship to yours, their parenting to yours, and I don't want you to feel so frustrated and like, what's wrong with me? Or, well, this, you start feeling even more hopeless. And that's not what I want from today. So I do want to be clear. This is not from my personal experience, as far as my personal, this is from my work experience of what works and what doesn't, and of course the research. Okay, so all right. So when you think of co-parenting, you would, when I'm talking about that, like with my ex or Gary's ex-wife, right? We work together. That's what co-parenting is. You work together with this person to decide what's best for the kids and how to mutually make that happen. You agree on expectation and rules. There's consistency across the two households. It's, not like one household has a 2 a.m. bedtime and the other one has an 8 a.m. bedtime. You're really co-parenting. And I'm not saying all of them line up exactly. You might have an ex, there might be an ex who lets them stay up till 10 instead of 8. But, you're still in the ballpark, right? You're still in the ballpark of parenting. Maybe the rules are slightly different, but they're pretty consistent across. When, my daughter just got in trouble at her dad's house, but then she was shifting to my house and the punishment transferred to my house, for example. Okay, so the grounding, she's grounded. So that's shifting to my house for the week because there was only one day at his. Do you know what I mean? That's co-parenting. We talked about it, what it was, the problem. We talked about how to solve it. What should the consequences be? We agreed on them and they're carried forth between the two houses. That's co-parenting. You're not doing that. We communicate often about co-parenting. We share decision-making. We negotiate among ourselves when it comes to if there's a change in the schedule or the kids' needs change, right? That's co-parenting. And as you've likely already learned, or you wouldn't be here with me right now, none of these reasonable, loving boundaries work when you've got a toxic ex. It doesn't. You've tried it. It doesn't. In contrast, okay, this is the contrast, when you're parallel parenting, there's no collaboration or checking in with the other parent about things that might come up. Instead, there are these rules and strict boundaries for everything with as little direct communication as possible. And I know, that can sound rough. Like, really? We're not, yeah, really. Again, there's going to be time, there's always going to be exceptions to these rules. There's always going to be time, if your kid breaks their leg, let's be real, you're going to have to contact the other parent, you're going to have to do something. But those aren't, that should be the exception. And if you're noticing exceptions constantly, then you don't have a strong enough parenting plan in place. Parenting plan in place. Should say that 10 times fast. Do you understand what I'm saying? You shouldn't have exceptions to the rule every other minute. Your ex, if they're toxic, your toxic ex will try to do that, will try to say everything's different, but this is your job to hold the boundary, okay? It's your job. I know. I'm sorry. Once again, it's on you. What do I always say? The one in the most pain needs to change first. You're in the most pain here. They're not. So you're the one who's going to have to really do this work. All right. So let's talk about my top 5 tips for parallel parenting with a toxic ex. I hope I've made it really clear what it is and why it's different than regular parenting that you might be hearing about. Okay. And the more someone has that sort of co-parenting thing going on, the more that the least like you that they are. So the more likely you are to not take their recommendations. How's that? Okay. All right. So tip number 1 is really the biggie, and that's to limit communication options. All right. Even if you think you already are, I want you to listen to make sure you're doing every one of these to the letter. Because again, you got to get a little bit rigid and narrow. Okay. So the majority, or I would say really all of but let's say the vast majority of your communication should happen through, to me, as far as I'm concerned, and what I've seen work with clients over and over, is that communication should happen through a parenting portal of some sort, possibly email. I'll get to email in a minute, but I really think that you should do it through a parenting portal. There are a few sites, apps, whatever you want to call them, that are admissible in court, which is really, to me, what you want to be using. So you probably already are, if you have a toxic ex. If you're not, get on it. But My Family Wizard, Talking Parents is another one I've seen used a lot. 2 Houses is another one. We'll link to those on the show notes page, but you can just look those up yourself. If you aren't using them, you should. And there are a few really important advantages to these types of sites. One is that the communication on them, like I said, is admissible in court, which can help prevent your ex from being abusive. So it is if you use it well, and I have clients who've really used it well, who've literally are divorced from, I mean, whole hog narcissists, like whole hog abusers. Like, to me, people who are really on the edge of that, and they've been able to do this well, okay? Where they are, if they're only using that portal, the ex has a very hard time getting through, so to speak, right? Getting into you, because they don't want to call you, all kinds of names on there, because they're, boom, you got a restraining order in 2 seconds because of this thing. So they're trying to be more sneaky, trust me. And they will do that. Although I've had people do it, and then again, you can get a restraining order pretty quickly. So it's having it there in that format is great. There are also features on these apps or these sites. I'm going to say apps, because it's like an app on your phone too, but they're a site too. There are features like read receipts, so your ex can't claim that they never got a particular message, and if they were continually refusing to answer you, right, on these apps, you can prove their non-communication in court. You can show, like, yeah, I sent it on this date, and they know to look and they don't, and there's no other way. So that's clear. You can also note things here that you'd like to use later for court. So for example, let's say your toxic ex shit talks about you to your kids, okay? This is, I think, one of the more common ones I hear about, where the ex, lies about the other parent. And this happens too sometimes. So you're with a narcissist or something. You're the one who wants out of the marriage or the relationship. And then the ex is like, well, we wouldn't be divorced if it wasn't for your mom. She's to blame, or your dad, he's to blame. And they're like, I didn't want to get divorced. It's all their fault that you have to go between these houses. They'll say things like that. They take no responsibility often, or they just talk about how horrible you are. And again, or they take something that is a little true and they blow it up, whatever. Write about this in an email to them via one of these, apps, right? Via one of these every single time it happens. And I've had 2 clients actually that I can think of off the top of my head who did this, and eventually their ex was court ordered into therapy, one into anger management, one into like regular therapy. And it actually stopped them shit talking to the kids, and they started to get more control over the kids, because it's again, it's proven to be abusive. So really not speaking about. Now, what has happened, I remember one of these people I'm going to talk about, every time she did that, her ex would yell at the kids and punish them at his house. And so my client was like, I don't want to keep doing this. The kids, if it's for the kids' best interest. And I said, yeah, but some of this is the long-term best interest of your kids, not the short-term best interest of your kids. I hear that they're getting punished, so you want to put that in the email. So she did. She started putting that. She put that in an email through, again, My Family Wizard, or that was the one she was using. She put it in there like, hey, the kids said that you punished them after blah, blah, blah. Now, of course, the ex came back and said, no, I punished them because of something else. But you are establishing a chain. You are establishing a chain of something that happens often. Judges aren't stupid. Now, yes, judges don't want to get involved in every little thing that's happening. They have full dockets. They're very busy. I've talked to judges in family court about this issue multiple times. I have over the years. And they are more reasonable than you might think. You could get a bad judge. Everybody does. There's bad judges. There's bad counselors. There's whatever. They are trying to do what's best for the kids always, and not, getting into something that feels like just this craziness with the parenting. So they want to stick to court orders, right? But they also, when they see something that shows a history of a certain kind of behavior, they do act on it. but you're the one who, the burden of all that is going to be on you. I know it's a pain in the ass. I know it's a lot, but So email is a secondary route of communication if you find it necessary, but nothing else, I would say. Email is good because you still have a paper trail, although I highly recommend doing everything again through those monitored apps. If your ex continues to try to contact you in other ways, again, you can respond via the app. So again, it can be admissible in court, if you sent something through the app. I see that you've continued to try to reach out, via phone or text or DM, whatever, although I've repeatedly asked that you only communicate here on this site. I'm not going to respond in any other format. You can, again, if there's 15 of those because they just sent you 15 texts, that is going to get seen by a judge on the other side. I get it. It's expensive. You have to go back to court. You have to do the judge. I get it. But a lot of this, if it's handled in this first year, this is just my experience, I'm going on right here, really does shift things for the long haul, because depending on how old your kids are, you got a long time with this person. At least in this way, you have a long time anyway. I mean, they're going to be in your life the rest of your kids. If your kids continue to have them in their life, they're forever, right? They're going to be at their weddings later and at baby showers and all the things. So this is about you establishing these boundaries right now, and keeping them as firm as you can. Okay. I will say, I think you should block your ex on all social media and email accounts. I think you should increase your privacy settings. And if you do feel like you got to email, then set up a separate address only for your ex. Block them on your regular email. Send them an email. Let them know this is the only address you can use for now on. You're blocked on my other accounts. Just say it. You're blocked on my other accounts. I won't be getting it. And I would do that again through the family monitoring app. Right? I would do it if you feel like you have to do this. This way, you can really get yourself mentally prepared to read an email from them. Otherwise, you're looking in your inbox and boom, there it is. It's such a trigger and you're not ready. You're at work, maybe you're somewhere else, and you're just not ready for this. And I will tell you, I had a personal friend who is divorced from a real horrible, toxic narcissist. And she set up this separate email, and she has a good friend who's a lawyer, right? And she actually, her friend who's the lawyer is the one who gets all the emails from her toxic ex and responds to them and lets her know when she needs to know something. That's how she does it. She lets my friend know, hey, this came up. I think you should know. Here's how I responded, or here's how I think I want to respond. I haven't responded yet. I'm letting you know. But otherwise, all those other things he would just send, because he felt he could, were all held in this other place. It was great. She didn't have to see it. She didn't have to be triggered all the time. I thought that was brilliant. That was her idea, not mine. I thought it was brilliant, and it really saved her from the constant triggering, because even though she had the separate account, he would just bombard with stuff. And, again, it's another reason you really want to have those monitored apps, because if you can, because they don't tend to bombard in those. Because they look crazy. Or if they do, God bless, let them bombard, because they look insane, later if someone's looking and reading, and that, which is your lawyer going to do that. So akin to this, you really need to set up rules for yourself, which should include how often you are going to check the parenting sites, these apps for communication, and how long you'll pause before responding. What is your rule, for all these things? What's your rule if they do text or call? You want to figure all this out and be very strict with yourself in these boundaries. That is where I see most people kind of falling down, so to speak. That's where, with my clients, they'll get that text from their ex, but it's sort of innocuous. So they respond. And then before you know it, there's 15 texts. Because they just don't want to deal. You're exhausted. I get it. It's so much. I'm so sorry. I am. I feel for you. And I know, but this is part of it, is not to give in, quote unquote, when they seem nice, when they seem okay, when they seem reasonable. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, oh, but on the other side, if I don't respond, you're trying to avoid the blow up. What I'm telling you is that you can't change your boundaries depending on how other people act. You can't change your boundaries to try to get an outcome in the future. This is where you will be miserable ultimately. It works occasionally. That's what it's like, an intermittent response. It's an intermittent reinforcement. Every now and then you'll respond nice and they'll respond nice and it goes away and you're like, oh, see, woo. But the other majority of the time it doesn't. It opens the door that little inch and they take not a mile, they take 50 miles. That they blow the door open. They're torpedoing that thing. I can't say this part enough. In my experience, what happens is that they wear you down. Your wonderful optimism, your beautiful, it's not compassion at that point. It's sympathy. Comes out, or sympathy for yourself. You're just like, I don't want to deal with them anymore. I'm just going to answer this. It's not going to help you in the long run. It's only going to help you in the short run. Or not at all going to help you in the short run. It's only going to very occasionally help you in the short run. The majority of the time, it's going to blow up in your face and you're going to be like, why did I do that? And you're going to forget. And then the next time comes and it happens again. I say a lot, easy choice is hard life, hard choice is easy life. That's how this works. So I know it seems like you don't want to do this, and I get it. And you just feel like you're too drained and it doesn't feel good because you're not this way with boundaries in the rest of your life. You like to be flexible. You've listened to all my podcasts. You're trying to do all the right things. And I wish I could say that this worked here. It doesn't. You're in one of the outlier situations where this doesn't work. So I need you to do the things, So I need you to kind of get stricter with your boundaries. I need you to really be clear. And I would write them down. I would do it with a therapist or yourself or your best friend, however you want to do that. But write down exactly, if they do this, I'm going to do this. If they do this, I'm going to do this. And just stick to that. I know. Okay. Tip number 2 is to expect bullshit. This is one of the biggest issues I see, is that my clients or people I know let down their guard with a toxic ex and then seem surprised when their ex is unreasonable, cruel, or annoying. You need to get yourself into a mental place where you say something like this to yourself. My ex is mentally ill, and although I'll continue to find compassion for them, I understand that I must expect them to remain exactly the same forever. Do not be hopeful. Do you ever hear me say this? If you've been listening to me for any amount of time, you know I'm the most hopeful person there is. I'm all about it. Like, you have to lean into hope. You have to lean into optimism. This is a time when you don't. You don't be hopeful or optimistic about your ex. Do not. Be rational and set up appropriate expectations so you're not disappointed or blindsided. Expect your ex to try to control you by forgetting to bring your son's soccer jersey or forgetting your daughter's science textbook, even though she has a test the next day, when the kids transfer to your house. Expect it. By the way, to combat this problem, which is one of the bigger problems I see, I tell my clients, get doubles, triples, or more of everything. Pay the coaches or teams for an extra jersey. Tell the school you need 2 sets of your kids' textbooks. Buy multiple clothing items, lunch containers, backpacks. Yep. You're going to throw money at the problem for a little while in all ways you can, so you don't need to get pulled into conversations asking where your daughter's cleats are. I know I have people really push against this because it's expensive, it seems wasteful, but your peace of mind is worth every penny. And I will tell you this, it's ultimately cheaper than therapy or more court appearances. It just is. If this is a thing you can overcome, and again, it's a common thing I see a lot, the ex will try to control with these kinds of things. again, expect it. So be prepared. I have a client who dresses the kids in very particular clothing anytime they go over to their dad's house. Anytime they go over, she dresses them in these sort of older clothes that not her kids' favorite things. She keeps her kids' favorite things at her house. And the weeks they're at with their dad, otherwise, every time what was happening is, and I don't, was he destroying things? Who knows? But these things kept going missing. They kept going missing. And it really became problematic. Her kids would get very upset. They'd come back. They'd have to go back and search. She'd ask her ex to search. It was so much engagement over like a favorite shirt or a soccer jersey or whatever. And so getting very careful about some of those more important things is really important. And when the kids are old enough, I have to tell you, it's really important to make it their responsibility to gather the things they're going to need as they transfer houses. You can create lists they can work from whenever they're packing up for the transition. However that works is what you need to do. You really be thoughtful about how that is, but expect it. Expect that things are going to be hard with them. Expect that they're going to try to mess things up. And that way you can be more prepared. Like, and for sure, if it's happened before, it'll likely happen again. So at least be prepared for the things have happened before. Like the forgetting things, the not having them where they need to be, things like that are the more common things I see that are ways to keep you very engaged and to keep a conversation going. So be mindful. Sip of water, hold on. Okay. Tip number 3 is you got to have a court order and expect them to break it. I know. Because you're not co-parenting. So it's up to you to decide what you want. Because you're not co-parenting, you've got to decide what you want. And I want you to write up a dream plan with your lawyer and start from there. Put everything you can think of in writing that will later become part of that court order. When you'll have the kids times. Who's responsible for picking up or dropping off? Where? When? What happens on the holidays? Literally, like I pick them up at 12 p.m. on Christmas Eve and drop them off, on Christmas Day, whatever. When things like child support will be paid, how it'll be paid. Get automatic payments for these things as much as you can. Have it part of the court order. You can't have gray areas. You need to make everything as explicit as possible. And now is the hard part. You're going to do all this. You're going to be like, Abby, I've done all this. And your toxic ex, it's pretty much guaranteed that they're going to ignore all or parts of your court order. If they're supposed to drop the kids at your home at 3, I have a client who the kids are supposed to be dropped off, let's say 3 o'clock. What happens is her ex will drop them off routinely at like 3:15 or 3:20 or 3:30, like not even 3:30, not even that late, but late, like a few minutes. So it looks like she's being unreasonable to say anything about the 3:15 drop off, right? Like about this problem. And one of the things you want to set up about this is that you don't have somewhere you have to be where you have to leave at 3. Okay, because you want to expect that. Now, you don't have to go to court because they're dropping off. If it's routinely the same time, 3:10, 3:15, you don't need to maybe go to court about that. If they just keep it there just to be passive aggressive, fine, let that be and just create that in your schedule. Oh, I get them at 3:15. And just whatever has to happen after that, make it after. And if you need them earlier, if you have to be somewhere and leave at 3, then I would say the drop off is at 2:30. I would change that in the court order. But I would also say that this client, her ex would also drop them off earlier than he was supposed to. He would drop them off at 2:30 when they were supposed to be there at 3. So sometimes she wasn't even home and he would drop them off into an empty house. Yeah, little kids, like young, I shouldn't say little, but young, like 7 and 5, I think the girls were. Like he would drop them off early. Just drop them off at the house. This is stuff you have to really have. That I would say something about, because that now again, unless it's something easy for you that you're home anyway. But if you're working from home, let's say, because that's what this guy was, he was like, well, I know you're working from home. What's the big deal? It's like, yeah, but you're working and you need, your work goes till 3. You can't attend to your children at that time. So again, that's the time when you might, go back and put that into the app thing. You're dropping them off at 2:30. The agreed upon time is 3. You might get somewhere closer to that. You've got to think about what does and doesn't work for you and what is looking like it's going to open a door just a little that's going to get blown open, right? So, and that was what started to happen for her, not with the later drop-offs. Like, again, he was always about 15 minutes late for a long time, but I guess he saw that wasn't pissing her off enough. So then he started dropping them off sometimes at 1, when they weren't due till 3, things like that. And, we had her document that and get in there, right? So you're some of this, I know I'm saying be rigid, but also you've got to think within that rigidity, right? Because if anything is too rigid, you're going to make yourself crazy. So I want you to think of each thing as, okay, how is this affecting my long term? How is this affecting my life? You're going to have to put it through I know you're reasonable. You're okay. You can do this. It takes a little practice. It takes, a little repetition, but you will figure out where you can just let the passive aggressive bullshit sit and where you can't. So they will absolutely break the court order in some way. Your job is to document, or choose what you won't. And again, do it via the shared family app, right? I will say this, some lawyers tell their clients to keep a separate list, to not put everything in the app, to just keep a list, like if it's always 15 minutes late, and then kind of wait until you have enough to put together. So I would say that even if you are choosing not to put it in the app that your, ex is always 15 minutes late with the kids, I would document that, dates, times. I would have a running list of that just in case you need to use it for something later, right? Just in case. You'll have that and it'll be there. It's still documented. It's just not something that you've had in court. And sometimes you get to a place where, again, I had a client, this is a man whose ex-wife was very toxic. And she would miss weekends a lot with the kids, a lot. Her time with the kids, she would miss them quite a bit. She would ask him to take the kids, other days. He was happy to do it. He wanted more time with his kids. They had 50-50, but he was down. But I told him, I said, document this because you're paying child support for this other thing. And that was contentious and they didn't have, tons of money. And so I'm like, you're paying child support for all and there's a lot of time here that she doesn't have the kids. So why are you paying child support for that? So he really started to track this stuff and it was more than he even realized. That was the thing, that he had the kids. So, but he was able to go back to court. He tracked it over about 6 months and he was able to get the order changed for him to have more custody and for him to pay less child support. So, that worked, right, over time. So you can get orders changed. I'm not saying it's the easiest, but you can. I really want you to push for sanctions when you can and fight for sole decision-making rights or sole custody when you have a toxic ex. Do your best around this. Because trying to make decisions together, obviously, is very, very hard when it comes to decision-making, therapy. Or therapy is the biggie I see. Often you will want your kids in therapy because you see all the things that are happening and your toxic ex does not want them in therapy. But if you have sole decision-making rights, even if you have shared custody, then they need to go to therapy and your ex needs to pay for half. This is how you get that stuff done. And I'll tell you, squeaky wheels get the grease. I will also say it's very, very hard for women in this situation because, there's a lot of the misogyny in the courts is just as alive as everywhere else in our world where, women are just vicious and we are so jealous and we're just, our hormones go crazy and, we're so vindictive and bitchy and all the things. So when we're looking for sanctions and we're pushing, we definitely get seen in a different light than men. And, and the man is standing there all often, right? Like, I don't know what she's talking about. I'm great. I work, I support my kids. I'm the best, and they are on their best behavior in court often. I will say that over time, that's why you have to document so much, because over time I have had those situations, and over time it got very clear to the judges and to the lawyers what was really going on, and they made some changes to the custody agreements and to the support agreements, so in the court order. So just, you gotta stick with this. Doing this type of work again in this like first year is going to set you up for success in the future, because you're going to gain more control of your kids, or of decision making, which is going to necessitate less access to, with your ex. And that's going to make you happier. At the very least, your ex will have less room to try to make your life miserable, even if there's still as much access with the kids, which also means a more peaceful life for you. Any way you add that up, it adds up to more peace. So take it. And I know it can get hard when you think about, well, I always want kids to have both parents in their lives as much as possible. But someone who's toxic to you is toxic to your children, without a doubt. So you want to be mindful of knowing that, and just do your best, do your best around that. All of this is do your best. That should be tip 6, do your best, because don't beat up on yourself. This is hard. You're not going to always be what my tip number 4 is. You're not going to always be this, but I'd like you to make it a goal to hold your boundaries and be ruthlessly consistent. That is tip 4. I know it's hard. I really, really do. And I know you just want to bow out sometimes and not let this person be such an essential part of your life. But the only way to get there is to get, again, the court order changed, which means keeping your boundaries like it's your job and being ruthlessly consistent. I'll say it again.